Welcome guys to this video analysis of Aryan Tari's game against Alireza Firouzja in the 5th round of Norway chess. Aryan Tari with the black pieces against the very promising Firouzja, 27-28 rated Grandmaster, now playing with the white pieces against Aryan. 26-33 is our Offerspiel champion, but he's not without chances in this game, as we will see, but a very tough opponent for Aryan indeed. E4, E5, and the players opt for a classical Italian game here. Bishop C4, Bishop C5, C3, and now instead of the old move D4, which has been properly analyzed on top level, probably just quite equal this move, but it's still playable at lower levels. D3 chosen by Alireza, keeping more pieces on the board, avoiding exchanges so far. Castled H6, and now some development moves from both players. H3, and now how to finish your setup with the black pieces here. Very often you play A6 or A5 to counter against this space gaining maneuver from white. So A6 chosen by Aryan, A4 from Firouzja, maybe preparing this or just gaining some space. Rook E8, the knight goes in a different direction. The classical knight F1, knight G3 maneuver is on the cards. Bishop E6 takes, and he takes with the rook, Aryan, which is logical. You don't want to take with the pawn if your rook is already on E8. That would mean a loss of tempo. You have to go back to F8 with the rook in order to activate it on the F file later. So rook E6 is consistent with his previous move. B4, Bishop A7. And these moves are, I guess, quite standard in this pawn structure in this opening. And white tries to gain some more space on the queen side, while black of course tries to regroup and be ready for a central thrust with D5 later. D4, Alireza Firouzja is the first to break in the center. Knight G6, Aryan is just in time. B5, and now knight H5, which is interesting. Trying to get the knight to F4 while keeping the knight on G6 to protect E5. Firouzja finishes his horsey maneuver with knight F1, the double of rooks, and now BA. Okay, both players left with an isolated pawn on the A file. Who is to profit from this? A5 from Firouzja. This pawn on A6 might be in trouble now because it's not so easy to protect it, and this pawn on A5 is also stopping the bishop on A7 from getting active, for example, later in this way. So this is really nicely done by Firouzja. Queen C8, keeping an eye out on the pawn on A6. Bishop E3, some exchanges, and Aryan wins the pawn on E4 thanks to this Bishop E3 move. But why did Firouzja sacrifice a full pawn? Well, it's not a total coincidence. He plays Queen C6 and prepares now Rook B7 to really pressure the black queen side. Of course, this pawn is well protected. There's nothing going on here. This bishop is well protected by two pieces and a pawn, so there's not much going on the E file for Aryan, and these knights are probably a bit offside now. Firouzja tries to shift the focus over to the queen side with this move. D5 from Aryan, a pawn sacrifice in order to get the queen away from the queen side. And now this move, taking on D5, knight F6, and queen B7. And as we can see, this bishop is super passive, and Firouzja is really tightening the screws, so to speak, in this position. He's really pressuring our Offerspiel champion Aryan Tari here. Rook B7, and now the knight is coming to C5 again. This pawn on A6 is proving to be a problem for Aryan in this game. Knight E4. manages to exchange a pair of knights, but to no real use actually, because now the pawn comes to c6, and it might really be a real nuisance for black. Aryan decides to stop this, playing c6 himself, but now this frees up the b6 square for the white rook in return. So Firouzja nets a pawn. He wins a pawn in this position, but there's still some play left for Aryan. He tries to exchange a bishop and get himself to a rook endgame instead. But Firouzja shows very good technique. Rook a1. The rook behind the pawn is a golden rule in such positions. Rook behind the pawn, and so you can hammer the pawn down the board. Rook c4, rook b6, of course winning the pawn back, but it's no real comfort for black, because this is winning for white, because the king is closer to where events are unfolding. Of course, if Aryan's king were here, for example, was here, this would be very nice for black. You could just capture the pawn on a7 and push your b pawn, but now you have to bring a king closer. But it's too slow, I'm afraid, because you're just one move too slow actually, because if you had your king on b6 you might survive, but rook a6 forces the king away, and now suddenly the pawn on b5 is lost. So there's not much to do here for black. Not a lot of waiting moves even. h5 played, rook b6. Now Firouzja just exchanges rooks and plays king c6, and this king and pawn endgame is easily winning for white. You will just gobble up these pawns at your own convenience with white and win the game. Aryan resigned. A very nice win for Alireza Firouzja. Probably a bit too easy against Aryan, but a valuable lesson learned, and we'll see how Aryan manages to bounce back in the tournament.